I've always been a deep admirer of Martin Luther King. I also work as a high school history teacher. So as luck would have it, during the pandemic, beginning stages of it last year, ended up with a little more downtime than what I usually do with the stay-at-home orders. I started to research a little bit about Martin Luther King's visit to Fort Wayne in 1963. And the more I researched, the more I realized that there was not a comprehensive story about his visit here. So that inspired me to write the book and just took the research and went with it after that. The title, Before the Dream, actually comes from the fact that he was here only 2 months before the March on Washington, which is where he gave his famous I Have a Dream speech. So that's where the title comes from. Greatest challenge, as is the case with any historical research that you do, is tracking down sources and finding the complete story. Some sources were pretty easy to obtain, others were a little bit more difficult. So sometimes I had to talk to a number of different people or look at multiple sources that were a little more difficult to obtain to find the information that I needed. So that posed a few challenges along the way. My approach was to start in a chronological format. So we started 1963, gave a little information prior to that, but then moved all the way up to modern day. And I knew I wanted to close with some of the challenges that we face today, because in my opinion, there are a lot of the same challenges that we faced during the Civil Rights Movement. So I closed getting into more modern day events like Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, the protests that followed and so forth. And I knew I wanted to close it with a Zoom meeting. You'll notice the last conference in my book is a Zoom conference where we have a number of African American leaders in the community talking about some of these challenges, racial profiling, redlining, policing, and so forth. So I figured that was an ideal way to conclude the book. What's different about this story is it took place in my hometown, right here in Fort Wayne, Indiana. But in addition to that, I talk a lot about the Civil Rights Movement, both national and local. And what struck me about the research is we were facing a lot of the same challenges right here in Fort Wayne, Indiana, that we heard about in the South. We hear all about the sit-ins, the freedom rides in the South, violence and so on. We didn't have a great deal of racial violence here in Fort Wayne, but we had restaurants that refused to serve blacks. We had hotels that refused to serve blacks. We had movie theaters with segregating seating. I didn't know about much of that until I delved into my research. So to answer your question, I think that was a little different to show my hometown of Fort Wayne, Indiana, dealt with a lot of the same challenges as what we heard in southern cities and as well as all around the country. My hope and expectation is that even though Dr. King died more than 50 years ago, his messages of hope, of love, of unity are just as relevant today as the height of the Civil Rights Movement in the 50s and 60s. Unfortunately, we are in a divisive time right now, a very partisan period. My hope is that the message of Dr. King will be reinvigorated in people to realize we still have a lot of work to do to come together. Calhoun Street is named for John Calhoun, one of our earliest vice presidents, and he not only was a slave owner, but he was a strong proponent for the institution of slavery. So we have a coalition that we formed. We met with the mayor about a month or so ago in an effort to try and get Calhoun Street renamed for Martin Luther King. I'm in my early 50s, and throughout my entire life I've always enjoyed research, I've enjoyed writing, and I always decided, well, I'm going to write a book someday. Someday I'm going to write a book. Half a dozen times I started writing novels, worked on it for a month, life got busy, put it aside, never finished it. Well, this time, someday happened. So my advice to any aspiring authors out there is stick with it. You find something that you believe in, that you're passionate about, stick with it, don't let anything get in your way. My book can be located at Amazon, Barnes & Noble website, but the 2 local Barnes & Noble stores will carry the book as well. Here in the History Center where we are tonight, that will also carry my book. People can find me on Twitter. My Twitter address is at my name, Chris Elliott, Elliott, and then capital F, capital W for Fort Wayne. So at Chris Elliott, FW.
My take on the book is that the creator of the book had some good subject material. It really fills a need for what's happening in America today as far as needs for equality and justice for everyone. And I am so proud of my husband for writing this book and portraying Martin Luther King in such a way that makes him relatable to all of us.
This is Neutral Voices, where your voice matters.